Hello, everyone. Welcome, listeners, to the sex talk you probably didn't get and your teen actually needs. So I am, excited to bring up this topic because it's so fun to talk about sex.
Absolutely.
Let's be honest for a second, though. Most of us didn't get a real sex talk. We got the warning talk or the don't get pregnant talk, or worse, silence or no talking talk. And now here we are, raising teens whose bodies are developing early and whose nervous systems, attachment patterns, and decision-making skills are often way behind in dysmaturity due to early difficult beginnings. So what do you say when your child is curious, exposed, maybe already sexually active, and you know that fear, shame, or control is not an effective path? So I'm welcoming today Rebecca Reber. She's a 24-year veteran educating teen parents. So thank you, Rebecca, for joining me here today for this really fun topic. And we're both really excited for it. It's a little bit of a difficult situation for most of us who have teens. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm all about empowering parents to tackle the tough conversations. And I don't know if there's one that's tougher than the sex talk. We talk about it as the talk, but I'm really a proponent that it is a conversation that continues from an early age for forever. I mean, your grown kids may come to you with questions. Heavens, I'm in perimenopause now and I'm talking to my kids still about my body and things that are happening. So I think it is a lifetime conversation. It's not a one-time conversation. And it starts, I believe, from the earliest age. I mean, talking, and then that's not talking about the mechanics of sex, but it's talking about their body and whose does this body belong to and what are the names of our body parts. I mean, it's really one of the developmental areas that we shy away from as a society. There's other countries that do a fabulous job of starting early, and they add a 6th developmental area to child development. And that is, I don't know if they call it a sexual or a body autonomy or what they call it, but they start at a young age talking about consent. And if I want to hug my friend in preschool, I need to ask them if it's okay to touch their body. And so this is a lifelong conversation, I believe. And parents, I also believe that it's far easier to have the big talk when they hit puberty or right before puberty, if you've laid the foundation that you already talk about bodies and relationships and healthy relationships. If you've been talking about that all the way along their life, it's not as scary. It's still scary. It's still uncomfortable. It's always going to be uncomfortable. Our children are always going to be a little embarrassed to have this conversation with us because we're their parents. But I truly believe children want a safe space to talk about tough things, sex being one of them. They may outwardly say, I don't want to talk about this with you, but that safe space is going to really be a landing place for them in middle school, high school, and beyond in their relationships. So that's kind of where I come from. I don't know if I always felt this way. Working 24 years with teen parents, I saw the patterns and I saw what happened when children didn't have someone in their life to talk to. And that's really where my philosophies began. And my own children would tell you I talk way too much about all of this stuff. But I have a grown son who's about to get married, and I have a teenager in high school. So I hope that I am their safe place, that they can come talk to me. And I want that for all families.
Yeah. So, after all these years working with teen parents, right? It's not parents of teens, it's teen parents.
Yes.
What's the conversation teen parents wish they had had before everything changed?
I would say about 90% of our teen parents that came through our program had never had any kind of sex ed. A lot of them didn't even understand their own anatomy. So they didn't even know what made babies. They didn't know what form of sex produced babies. They didn't know their own body and how this baby was growing inside of them. And that 90% would say, my parents flat out wouldn't talk about it. Whether it's culturally or just family dynamics or parents that just weren't involved, they would all say, I wish I had known then when I started dating or having relationships what we would then teach them in the teen parent program, which is, how does your body work? Why do you have periods? And I'm speaking from a female point of view here. Most of our teens enrolled were young women. We did have some dads, and they would go through the same process of learning about their bodies and the female body and how babies are made. But not only did they want to know what sex was and how babies were made, but they wanted a place where they could come ask questions like, again, why do I have a period? Or they'd say, my baby's growing in my stomach. And we'd say, well, it's actually your uterus. Or they'd come to us and say, how is this baby leaving my body? And we'd have to go through that very traumatic conversation with them of how this baby was going to go through labor and delivery and what was going to happen to their body. And I'm talking, sometimes they were 14 years old.
Right.
So I think they all wanted the information. And a lot of times our society says, well, if you give them that information, they're going to run out and do something with it, which implies they're going to go out and have sex. And in fact, the research says it's the opposite. Once you give children knowledge, say you're teaching them about drugs, they're less likely to do the drugs. So I am going to apologize because my brain went blank and I'm thinking of your original question. But what did they want to know? There we go.
Well, what do they wish they knew? What do they wish they had known?
They wish they would have known how you get pregnant, what a healthy relationship looks like. When I talk about early conversations with your children, I think the huge foundation is, what is a healthy relationship? Because a lot of them found themselves being coerced or broken down into having sex, and they didn't know that they didn't have to. They just didn't have the foundations of healthy relationships either. That's even before you get to the sex talk. But they wanted the information. They wanted to be empowered to have made different decisions or decisions on their terms, or to be protected against pregnancy and STIs. They wanted that information. We had the few that had gathered their own information and knew, what their body did. And kids can get information anywhere. And that's another piece we can talk about. But there were a few that knew, and they went into this wanting to have a baby. And that's a whole nother conversation. But the majority wanted to know ahead of time. It's like teaching a teen to drive a car. We don't just put them in the car. They go through classes. We train them. We teach them. We talk about situations. I use that analogy in it because we put them out into the world of relationships most of the time with nothing to guide them, except maybe what they learn on their phone and what they learn from others and their peers. I believe deeply that our teens want to know. They want the guidance. We give it on so many other topics. Why aren't we talking about relationships and sex and babies and STIs?
So in your experience, what do they most frequently, let's say, misunderstand about sex itself, where you discovered, whoa, okay, this is back to a certain place that you didn't realize?
It went all the way back to anatomy. And I remember a young lady, this will never leave my mind. She was, I think, a sophomore in high school. She came into our program. She was pregnant, and it took her a while to open up. But finally, she said, you know what, Miss Rebecca, we were laying there, and he was laying behind me, and I felt something, and I didn't even know that what he was doing to me was sex. And I've never forgotten her face. She didn't know. I mean, one, he violated her. She didn't know the basics of a healthy relationship, that she had the right to stop him. And she ended up pregnant from this relationship. She didn't know about her cycles. She didn't know how sperms and eggs, it was everything. The absolute lack of information, of the basic information, was missing. And I saw that time and time again, where we would get out diagrams of the female reproductive system and say, this is what's going on inside of you. This is where the baby's growing. It was over and over and over again. And when I started to look back, or I started to look at the education system, so many parents rely on school to teach sex ed. And we know that in the 5th grade, most schools still teach the puberty talk, But as parents, is that what we're relying on for, the half day puberty talk and that's it? What if a child's absent? What if a parent signs them out of it? Then they don't even have that basic. And then they have 1 week in health class, I think in high school, at least in California, where they get reproductive health. And it's usually, no offense, it's usually taught by the football coach who also teaches health. It's not necessarily even anybody in the medical field. I'm going on a tangent here, but if you follow through, the education really has to start at home, because the gaps in the American sex education and healthy relationship is so pitiful. And in some states, it's not even happening. And we know that. You can look state to state, and it depends on the political pendulum and all sorts of things, but it really has to start at home. And so I would say the teens that I worked with had very little understanding. Sex was something that they were expected to have. The message in our schools is if you have a boyfriend, you're having some sort of sex with them. What type of sex produces a baby? They don't know, or they're watching stuff on their phones. And I know I'm going on, but it's just this snowball effect that leads to no information or misinformation. And that's what our teens were lacking. And we could almost, every teen that came through our door, they had different family lives, they had different needs, immediate needs, but they all needed the basics of reproductive health and how the systems worked and how the baby was going to leave your body. I just got very frustrated with the parenting side of things because it seemed to be incredibly lacking. It is incredibly lacking.
Well, and I think that's because intergenerationally we get what we were given and we give what we got. And so
Absolutely.
I think it's bigger than parents, right? It's societal. But I guess I want to sort of shift now, because most of my listeners are parents with children who come from difficult beginnings. I know that you're talking about a diverse population here for sure, but I want to kind of move a little bit and shift a little bit toward making sure that we're addressing trauma histories and kids who may equate sex with love, attachment hunger with sexual readiness, trauma-driven yeses versus authentic consent, and the need to belong, overriding internal signals that I really don't want to do this yet, right? Those are the three things I could really think of, right? That were so big for kids. And how is the talk different without shaming?
Oh, absolutely. So I talked about the 90% that came into our program that had very little education. The others, and I kind of hinted at this before, just as you said, knew what they were doing. They wanted a baby. They wanted a connection with another human being. And when they found this young man, there were some that made plans together to have a baby. And I'm talking sophomores. At the end of my 24 years, we had a huge wave of sophomores that made plans with their significant others to have a baby. At first, from my point of view, my upbringing, I was in shock. I couldn't believe, and my daughter was coming up right to that age. I was blown away by this. Why? And as I dug into their backgrounds, I found the trauma, and they started to open up about the trauma, and they started to open up about their family lives and the brokenness, and it all began to make sense. I grieved a little bit that year for these specific sophomores that I'm talking about right now, because they were stepping into the adult world with adult decisions because they had never had connection and love, and they wanted it. And they are terrific mommies. And I want to say that first off, all of our teen parents, I keep in touch with a lot of terrific mommies, but they were making decisions based on wanting a connection. Most of those relationships with the teen boys didn't survive, but they have their baby. And so I think the conversation is different in some ways and not so different in other ways. I think the basic of healthy relationships as the foundation to the sex talk. You're right that they may not get that from a parent. I don't know who fills in that gap, but that talking about whether
TikTok.
it's TikTok, well, no, not TikTok. These teens with trauma or these children with trauma need an adult or a loved one in their life that can teach them about healthy relationships. And what if they don't have it? Maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it was our job in the teen parent program. I'm not sure. But in terms of trauma, they may seek those connections. They may want the sexual connection. They may want the baby. I don't know if I have the answer to how you start that early in a broken, traumatic life. I know what they need. I don't know if I know how you get it there unless they're able to speak with a therapist or they're able to speak with a teacher, a mentor, somebody that can speak into their life on what a healthy relationship looks like, what healthy connection looks like. I don't know if I'm equipped to answer.
Well, I've got it.
Good. I'm so glad. I was hoping you would step in because this is your wheelhouse, and I just know what education they need. I'm not sure how you get them there.
I see. Yeah. So, here's what I know. I know that if our children are seeking love, they're seeking love because they feel unloved or unlovable. And that when we have adopted kids, often they bring to the adoptive relationship that feeling. And then we, adoptive parents, spend the rest of our time actually trying to fill that in. And it's very hard to fill in. And so in my experience, one of the things that's really important when our kids are just prepubescent, we start talking about that feeling they have of longing, of wanting, that empty feeling they might have in their chest or their stomach that says they need something they're not getting, and to help them identify it as a deficit that occurred in childhood when they lost their original parents. And this is very deep. And I know that you alluded to therapists and other people filling this gap, but I don't think so. I think it's for parents to understand it themselves and to learn from here or other places how to talk about this longing that our kids have who've been traumatized. And this longing is real. This need to belong, this need to feel part of, they come by naturally, but it's a trauma response to what happened to them. And if we don't talk about it and help them identify it, they'll go on to fill it with love interests that will not pan out likely, but they may end up with a baby. And babies last a lifetime unless they get taken away. And that's what happens sometimes with younger parents. They lose their babies because they really aren't equipped, and the parents aren't equipped to raise their grandbabies. So it's a big deal. And we can go a long way toward talking about this experience that kids feel and helping them identify it, and then giving them so much connection and love and support for this reality that they live with that is not neurotypical. It's not normal. Yes. It is different. They are different in that way. Now, everybody has the longing. Everybody wants to belong. Everybody needs love. And in adolescence, we're all seeking it for sure. But the trauma piece adds intensity and a kind of deficit that makes it so potent, right? And so powerful and overwhelming that our kids sometimes will throw out everything in order to get it.
I think you said that beautifully from the lens of the adopted parent with the child that's been through so much trauma. This is another piece of that lifelong conversation, just along with healthy relationship and your body and relationships and dating and sex, that you have this conversation as well. And something just occurred to me that I think all families could use what you just said, could talk about it.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. It's
Absolutely.
a topic for everybody.
I'm reflecting in my own life, and I'm wondering, did I ever speak to this, or did I ever speak this into somebody's life? Because you said it so beautifully. That's exactly what I needed when I said, I'm not sure I'm equipped to speak on this, but thank you.
Yeah, well, I want all of us, right? Everybody's always growing and learning, and you can be an expert in any field and still need more support, right?
Absolutely.
So let's shift a little bit the conversation to talking about consent with our teens and what real consent looks like, and especially for teens who are wired to fawn or fear rejection, right? Fawn for it or fear rejection. And I think consent is interesting, right? I mean, kids are often overwhelmed by adults who hug them when they don't ask for hugs, who tell them to not say no, to tell them that it's not okay for them to strike out when they feel frightened, things like that, which, you can totally understand. And yet when they get into the teen years, this wiring for fawning or fear is a big deal.
Yeah, and part of our program on the comprehensive high school was the proactive education. So we would bring in here in Riverside County, we'd bring in the Rape Crisis Center to talk to all of our freshmen about consent and do a healthy relationship talk. It was shocking to me to stand back and watch as the presenter spoke and talked about consent and age of consent and what does consent really look like and when can you not consent, and the shocked, almost unbelievable face of these 14-year-olds, just absolutely like, nuh-uh, no way, we can't consent till we're 18. And I bring them up because sitting there in that room with class after class after class going through these presentations, I realized just how there had been no consent talked back all the way. These were the kids that, the aunties were squeezing them and the uncles were having them sit on their lap or whatever atrocious things were happening. And then you get in a room with them at high school level and they have no concept of what consent is. So consent for me is one of those very beginning pieces that you can start at an early age, teaching them about this is my body. I get to say what happens to it within all the safety guards of not running out in the street or something horrible like that. But consent is that first piece. And if you lay a foundation, that doesn't mean that they're not going to feel the pressure of high school and the pressure of social media and the pressure of all the other things that our teens have to deal with. But at least you've started the foundation, you've started the conversation, and then you keep coming back to it. I took a year, I think, at the high school level, and I just asked all the teens that came through our program, is sex an automatic when you have a boyfriend? And the answer was yes. And it was like, well, where do you personally get to make that decision? And the pressure that's on our kids. And so this is one of those tough conversations within consent that you start talking about in preteen and dating. No, you don't have to have sex. You need to listen to that voice inside of yourself. You need to trust it. You need to own it. And you need to follow it. And that's a parental foundation, a conversation. The families that didn't have it or didn't give that piece to their children or work with that piece with their children, we saw a lot of that in the teen parent program. It all comes back to conversations, talking. And it doesn't always have to be about your teen. It can be, my daughter will do this a lot. She'll say, my friend has started doing this with her boyfriend. And we can talk about it in the context of her friend. Is this okay with your friend? Is she consenting to this? Does she feel this is the right move? Our teens are faced with so much peer pressure and so much societal pressure within their groups right now that if that foundation isn't there, it's very easy for someone to crack through and break whatever steadfast feelings the teen had. Because you're right, they want to belong, they want to fit in, they want to be part of the cool club, or whatever.
So Rebecca, let me, we're just about to run out of time. So let me ask you, is there somewhere that you would like to direct my listeners to learn more about you or to follow up with you in any way? This is your opportunity to share a little bit.
Yeah, so my website, RebeccaReber.com. They can get in touch. They can share stories if they have a particular story that they think would help me grow or anything they wanted to share, because this conversation with you has my brain reeling. So I'm always open to learn and hear different perspectives. But my website's the best place, but I am also on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me under my name. My bio's there, different books that I've contributed to. So that's really, the website is probably the best place. And I'd love to hear from your listeners, different perspectives, stories. I'm always collecting knowledge. So,
well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And all of your information will be in the show notes, listeners, in case you want to reach out and get a little more information. Hey, this isn't about controlling your teen's choices. It's about helping them become someone who can make those choices with some clarity, some safety, and above all, self-respect. It's so hard to be a teen these days.
Yes.
Actually, it's always been hard to be a teen, but it's really hard to be a teen from difficult beginnings. And if your child didn't get the early building blocks they needed because they had other survival needs going on, this isn't a one-time talk. This is an ongoing talk about relationship building and learning how to have consent about what happens to your body and your life. It's a relationship you build conversation by conversation, moment by moment. You're right on time, parents, to become the voice they can trust. So stay open, stay loving, and remember, your love matters when more than love is required. I'll see you in the next episode of UnMuted Love.